Professor Marston and the Wonder Woman, the real story behind the origin of Wonder Woman. Wonder Woman first appeared in the comic books in 1941, just a few years after Superman in 1938 and Batman in 1939. In 1975, Wonder Woman was a TV film and continued as a weekly series 1976 to 79 with Linda Carter, Miss World USA 1972 as the lead star. Israeli Gal Gadot as Wonder Woman reached the big screen in 2017, grossed $412.6 million in the United States and a worldwide total of $821.8 million, against an estimated production budget of $140 million. In the very same year of Wonder Woman, the blockbuster, another film told the story of how Wonder Woman came into existence. Professor Marston and the Wonder Woman tells the story of William Moulton Marston, who first created the fictional character Wonder Woman based on his lifelong relationship he had with two women. After first reading about William Marston, movie director Angela Robinson spent 8 years off and on writing the screenplay. Robinson, known for gay activist films, focused on the personal relationship of the three main protagonists. She found 3 very attractive actors to perform the roles. The film, written and directed by Angela Robinson, stars Bella Heathcote, Rebecca Hall, and Luke Evans. The film received positive reviews from both critics and movie audiences, but only received $1.9 million in its limited U.S. box office release in 2017. Let's delve into just what led Professor Marston to create the original character of Wonder Woman. The early 1900s was a time when the United States was undergoing both social and political changes. Women freedom and activism was especially in vogue. After World War I and the Spanish flu pandemic, the American public focused on glamour and leisure. There was a growing public expression of sexuality emerging. Women were no longer confined to domestic work and family rearing. Women flirted, danced, and had sex. William Moulton Marston, born in 1893, was a college professor, psychologist, and self-help author who researched and wrote many articles on how the social and political changes impacted American way of life. Unbeknownst to many was William Marston's most unorthodox personal life relationship with wife Elizabeth Marston and his research assistant Olive Byrne. Olive, as a graduate assistant, surprised the Marstons to kinky sorority parties. In the mid-1920s, Marston and his wife and Olive participated in a cult of female sexual power organized by Marston's Aunt Caroline. Coincidentally, Olive was related to Ethel Byrne, her mother, and Margaret Singer, her aunt, 2 well-known outspoken suffragettes. The sisters not only supported the Equal Rights Amendment for women, but opened the first birth control clinic in the United States. Through Olive, William Marston learned more about the suffragettes. He viewed them as an outspoken cult with beliefs and mannerism separate from the norm, not necessarily bad. He supported many of the ideas the suffragettes advocated. Suffragette Margaret Sanger, in her book Woman and the New Race, argued that women had chained herself to her place in society and the family. Margaret Sanger on horseback in a protest demonstration. Suffragettes chained themselves to fences and railings in public spaces to draw attention to their plight. The chains were symbols of the oppression of women and their lack of equal rights. Marston saw how suffragettes knew the importance of appearance. Women in suffragette white is still a mainstay of women protest tactics to this very day. Suffragettes were encouraged to dress in their smartest clothes and be the epitome of stylish femininity. This dress uniformity fostered belonging as a group. Suffragettes showed their allegiance to the cause by wearing accessories or items of jewelry, sash, and scarves in suffragette colors: white for purity, green for hope, and purple for dignity. In the next decade, the relationship of William, Elizabeth, and Olive grew stronger and tighter. William had 2 children each with both his wife Elizabeth and partner Olive. Elizabeth gave birth to a son, Pete, and a daughter, Olive Ann. Olive gave birth to 2 sons, Bern and Don. Elizabeth supported the family, working until she retired at 61, while Olive stayed home to take care of the children. All 4 siblings went to college, including one to medical school and another to law school. William Marston's family portrait. Just your typical ordinary family portrait in the 1940s. William Marston seated center. Olive standing top right. Wife Elizabeth bottom right. Their 4 children, and Marjorie bottom left. Just your typical ordinary family portrait in the 1940s. William Marston's legacy and his family's fortune changed dramatically with the introduction of comic books. In 1934, a former military officer, Malcolm Wheeler Nicholson, published the first comic book, entirely new material rather than reprints of newspaper strips. Wheeler's Detective Comics, DC Comics, published the first Superman story in 1938. Next success was Batman with his high-tech gadgets and boy wonder Robin. In 1939, sales of comics totaled 700,000 copies, at then a pricey 10 cents per copy. A movie ticket was 23 cents, but a loaf of bread was only 8 cents. By 1942, sales totaled 231 million. The success of DC Comics meant imitators, each new imitator more lurid than the previous one. Parents and columnists questioned the effect of comics on the youth of America. Detroit Police Commissioner Harry S. Toy saw comics were loaded with communist teachings, sex, and racial discrimination. One defendant of comics was Marston, who in a nationally published magazine, The Family Circle, saw the great educational potential in comic books. The interview, written by Olive Byrne, caught the attention of comic publisher Max Gaines, who hired Marston as an educational consultant. Gaines hoped to deflect the mounting criticism to comics for its graphic violence and the demoralization of children. As it turned out, Marston was not only supportive of comics as a publishing medium, he developed his concepts of superheroes. He wanted a superhero who would conquer not with fists or firepower, but with love. "Fine," said his wife Elizabeth, "but make her a woman." Marston did just that. Wonder Woman was a feminine character with all the strength of Superman, plus all the allure of a good and beautiful woman. Wonder Woman to be a psychological propaganda for a new type of woman that he believed should rule the world. Marston wrote in the 1943 issue of the American Scholar, "Women's strong qualities have been despised because of their weakness. Not even girls want to be girls so long as our feminine archetype lacks force, strength, and power. They don't want to be tender, submissive, peace-loving as good women are." DC Comics first introduced Wonder Woman in All-Star Comics #8 in December 1941. William Marston used a pseudonym, Charles Moulton. Wonder Woman, a native from an all-female Amazons, becomes a crime-fighting U.S. government agent. Using her super strength and agility and her ability to force villains to tell the truth by binding them with her magic lasso. The magic lasso of truth is a reference to Marston with his wife Elizabeth's invention of an early prototype of the lie detector. The bracelets of submission are a pair of metal bracelets worn to protect against bullets and missiles. The inspiration of the bracelets came from the pair of bracelets worn by Olive Byrne. Paradise Island is shown without men. What Marston really meant is the absence of shackles, man placed on women. Images of bound and gagged women were frequently shown in Marston's Wonder Woman stories. According to Marston, Amazons temporarily lose their super strength if a man welds chains to their bracelets. Women had to break free of those chains in order to signify their emancipation from men and comradeship to each other. Marston maintained that women were dominated by men, but if women were allowed to be leaders, the wars would end. Women are the natural spoils of war. They must remain at home, helpless slaves for the victor. If women become warriors like the Amazons, they'll grow stronger than men and put an end to war. Wonder Woman was an immediate success in 1942. By its third issue, it was selling 500,000 copies. Marston in World War II didn't just have Wonder Woman fighting Nazis. Wonder Woman exposed current issues of the time, like the milk trust monopoly and textile workers' women's right to work and equal pay. Marston wanted women models that both women and men could look up to. With each Wonder Woman comic was an insert profiling women of history from Florence Nightingale, Claire Barton, Madame Chiang Kai-shek, Helen Keller, Nellie Bly, Susan B. Anthony, and more. After Wonder Woman's success, Marston revealed he was the creator. In reality, the comic was a family product. Marston's wives and children occasionally came up with ideas. Marjorie Huntley and daughter-in-law Louise did lettering and inkling. In fact, more women worked on it than men, including Helen Shepens, coloring, and Jim and Margaret Rolton, lettering, and Joy Hummel, storylines. Joy became the series' main writer in 1945 to 1947. After her husband died in 1947, Elizabeth Marston offered to continue Wonder Woman. Instead, DC Comics opted for in-house male writers. This ended the Marstons' creative input to Wonder Woman in DC Comics. Comic book burning rallies did not begin until the 1950s, well after William Marston had died in 1947. The film implied that William Marston was under constant personal negative attack for his depiction of Wonder Woman. One critic was Josette Frank, a national children's literature expert who deplored Wonder Woman's skimpy costume and the recurrent themes of bondage. Released in 1954, Seduction of the Innocent, Frederick Wertham, a psychiatrist, stated that Wonder Woman was a lesbian and her comics should be banned. Wertham believed that comics caused youth to be delinquents. This led to congressional inquiry of the comic book industry and more comic burning rallies. In 1954, the Comic Code was enacted, self-regulating by the major comic publishing companies, similar to the Hays Film Production Code enacted in 1934 by the motion pictures in Hollywood. DC Comics did not know what to do with Wonder Woman. The storyline and art design were continually passed on to different writers and artists. In 1968 comics, Wonder Woman voluntarily surrendered her Amazon's powers to remain in man's world, as Diana Prince ran a clothing boutique and fought crime acting with other private detective allies. From 1952 to 1956, the number of different comic book titles published in the United States fell from 630 to 250. Monthly sales dropped from 60 million to 34.6 million over the same period. Max Gaines' son, William Gaines, inherited DC Comics. He decided it was no longer worth the frustration. He converted his successful humor Mad into a magazine, ending his association with comic books. Women activist Gloria Steinem, who grew up reading the Wonder Woman comics, was offended that the most famous female superheroine had been depowered, placed Wonder Woman on the cover of the first issue of Ms. 1972. Wonder Woman's Amazon powers and her traditional costume were restored in 1973. In the 2017 film, Wonder Woman returned to her origin fighting the Germans in World War I. To this day, DC Comics continues to publish Wonder Woman, 82 years after Wonder Woman's first issue in 1941. Marston had the foresight of signing a financially lucrative contract with DC Comics before his death. The company was contractually obliged to publish at least 4 issues of the series a year, or they would lose their rights. As a result, he was one of the few comic writers to get rich off his own creation and pass his wealth on to his surviving heirs. To ensure that all of his 2 sons shared in the Marstons' wealth, William and Elizabeth officially adopted them. William Marston died of cancer in 1947, 7 days before his 54th birthday. After his death, Elizabeth and Olive continued to live together until Olive's death in 1990, age 86. Elizabeth died in 1993, age 100. There was very little direct communication between the film's writer and immediate family members. Considering how close and private the Marston family was, it's doubtful, as depicted in the film, that any neighbor ever wandered into the Marstons' household to discover kinky costume sex. After the film came out in 2017, one family member, Christy Marston, a granddaughter who only knew Elizabeth and Olive when they were elderly, was asked if the two were romantically involved. She replied, no, that they would have told me. On the other hand, Pete Marston, the son of William and Elizabeth, has a somewhat different take. The adults had their part of the house, the kids had theirs, he says. But who cares? Olive's son Bryn stated without hesitancy the two women, Elizabeth and Olive, they really thought he was a great man and they admired him. Professor Marston and the Wonder Woman.